On April 19, 1991, around 1 in the afternoon, David Hibbs arrived at his house eager to tell his mother, Joy Hibbs, that he had made the honor roll on his report card. Unfortunately, instead of finding his family house in Corydon, Pennsylvania the way he had left it, he returned to find it in a smoke-filled state. David ran to the back kitchen door after noticing that his mother's car was in the driveway, but heavy smoke stopped him from going through. David somehow managed to observe that the 4 gas stove burners were all lit up. At his young age, the only logical reason to what must have caused the fire was that his mother had been cooking and had forgotten to put out the fire. A helpless David yelled for assistance in panic. He was heard by neighbors doing yard work, and they tried to go in to find Joy Hibbs, but the fire was too fierce. They immediately called the firefighters. Before the firefighters arrived, as the fire increased and burned endlessly, the neighbors tried to put it out with a garden hose. After what seemed like a lifetime, the fire was finally put out by the firefighters, and a paramedic sadly informed 10-year-old David that his mother had passed away. The body of 36-year-old Joy Hibbs was found by the firefighters in David's bedroom. She had been burnt beyond recognition on the remains of David's mattress. Initially, detectives thought Joy Hibbs had perished in an accidental fire, but an autopsy revealed otherwise. There was no indication that Joy had inhaled smoke, thus it was obvious that she had already passed away before the fire was started. Also, Joy Hibbs had been brutally assaulted, strangled with wire cords, and then stabbed 5 times in the chest and neck before her attacker purposefully started the fire to hide every iota of evidence at the scene. This was a clever cover-up approach by the killer, given that the house had been completely destroyed from the fire, and that the neighbors had destroyed important evidence while attempting to put out the fire. According to the findings of the fire marshal's investigation, the fire originated from 4 different locations in the home: 2 in the kitchen, 1 in David's bedroom, and 1 in the corridor. According to the investigators, the morning of her death, Joy had cashed her paycheck. Her purse's contents were tossed on the living room floor, and the police found her wallet stuffed under the couch. The absence of evidence was compounded by the difficulty the investigators experienced in determining a motive. Joy was adored by all, worked part-time as a medical assistant, and was committed to her family. David Hibbs described his mother as graceful, polite, and easygoing. Authorities had no leads whatsoever as to the person who would want to kill her. On the day she was killed, Joy had dropped her 2 kids off at school in the morning. She received her paycheck, ran a few errands, and got home shortly after 11 o'clock in the morning. A church pastor and another member of the congregation dropped by for a visit shortly after she returned home. Joy Hibbs had indicated a desire to celebrate Easter in the church. Just before noon, the pastor and a member of the church departed the Hibbs family house. According to eyewitnesses, there was a dark blue Monte Carlo parked across the Hibbs yard shortly after the church pastor and his member left. The car was said to have remained there until 1 p.m. 2 days after Joy Hibbs' murder, former Bristol County Police Chief Tommy Mills, who was also a narcotics detective, reached out to the residence of Robert Francis Atkins in Falls, Pennsylvania. Robert lived about 2 hours away from where Joy Hibbs lived. Joy and her husband would occasionally buy tiny amounts of marijuana from Robert Atkins, who also appeared to have been their former neighbor. Robert resisted letting the detectives into his house. In the driveway, Detective Tommy Mills spotted a dark-colored Monte Carlo that matched a witness's description of a similar vehicle parked carelessly outside Joy's house shortly before the neighborhood heard the fire. However, during further investigation, the witness said Robert Atkins' automobile wasn't the one they saw. Robert Atkins was invited to undergo a polygraph by the investigators, but he refused, explaining that he had damaged his arm and that his lawyer had instructed him to wait since the nerve damage would affect the polygraph results. He further disclosed that he was camping at the Poconos with his family, friends, and co-workers when Joy's murder took place. Detectives soon verified his alibi. Robert confirmed that he bought a little marijuana for the Hibbs, but he wasn't a dealer. In the weeks preceding his mother's murder, David Hibbs overheard her arguing with Robert Atkins on the phone over the most recent purchase of a baggie of marijuana. Because the baggie was packed with stems and seeds, Joy demanded her money back from Robert. When asked by the police, Robert confirmed these arguments. He, however, stated that he had informed Joy that he couldn't refund her the money. According to him, it was simply improper. Investigators couldn't understand how a few tiny baggies of marijuana could cause someone to die. The couple was only spending $20 to $40 on marijuana at a time, not enough to get the attention of major sellers. On April 27, 1991, a co-worker of April Atkins, the wife of Robert Atkins, came forward to say that on the day Joy Hibbs was murdered, she had called the Atkins residence between 1 p.m. and 1:30 p.m., and Robert Atkins had picked up the call. On hearing this, the police now thought Joy's murder took place between 11:50 and 12:50. The police turned their attention to Joy's private life after determining that Robert Atkins' alibi appeared to be flawless. They questioned Joy's relatives and friends and found nothing unusual. Except for the person who had killed Joy, no one seemed to harbor any wicked intentions for her. Robert Atkins was still a person of interest in the case, despite having an alibi, though. 23 years after Joy was brutally murdered, a new Bristol Township detective, Michael Slaughter, was assigned the cold case in April 2014. Detective Slaughter made the decision to visit April Atkins, who claimed that she had never been questioned by authorities regarding the death of Joy Hibbs. She, however, clung to the narrative that her family was on vacation in the Poconos that weekend and hadn't learned of Joy's murder until they returned. A few days later, Detective Slaughter re-interrogated Robert Atkins regarding his movements at the time of Joy's death. He supported his wife's account of going camping and revealed to Slaughter that he had been a secret narcotics informant in 1991, doing drug deals and then reporting them to the police. During an interview with Slaughter in May 2014, a co-worker of Joy claimed that on the Monday before she was killed, a man called Joy at work and threatened to kill her. The co-worker decided not to report the call to the police because Joy's husband was now the focus of the investigation at the time. 2 years later, in September 2016, April Atkins, who is now divorced, traveled to the Bristol Township Police Station in order to provide a taped statement regarding her ex-husband's whereabouts during the murder of Joy Hibbs. Detective Slaughter was informed by April that Robert Atkins had returned home covered in blood after allegedly stabbing someone and setting their home on fire. He then instructed her to gather the children, take a few days off work, and travel to the Poconos in the north. Out of anxiety and fear, April remained silent. That day, Robert Atkins took a shower after washing his blood-stained clothing. April Atkins didn't find out about Joy Hibbs' murder until after the family had returned from the Poconos. Even with this revelation, nothing significant occurred in Joy Hibbs' case for the next 5 years until November 2021, when Bucks County Detective David Hanks located a former co-worker of April Atkins back in 1991. The co-worker initially denied knowing April, but after the DA subpoenaed her to testify before a grand jury over the phone call she had made to the Atkins house, she changed her story. When he was supposed to be camping at the Poconos, Robert Atkins answered the phone call. The following month, Detective Hanks caught a conversation between Robert Atkins and his ex-wife, April, on tape. Robert was led to believe that April had informed her roommate of his involvement in the murder of Joy Hibbs. Naturally, this raised Robert Atkins' blood pressure. Also, his son testified in court in April 2022 that his father had informed him in December that he was likely going to be arrested soon for something that had occurred many years earlier. Robert first mentioned that a woman had died in a fire to his son before mentioning that she had been stabbed. Finally, 31 years after killing Joy Hibbs, Robert Atkins was arrested in May 2022. He is presently being held at the Bucks County Correctional Facility and faces charges of first and second-degree murder, 7 counts of arson, 2 counts of robbery, and 7 counts of first-degree arson in relation to the death of Joy Hibbs.